When I bought that piece of land on the edge of Briar Hollow, I wasn't looking for trouble. I was just looking for quiet somewhere. The noise of other people's ambitions couldn't reach me. The property had belonged to a research institute back in the 70s, and tucked behind the main house was this small cedar cabin, weathered and kind of shy-looking, the kind of place that creaks when you breathe near it. To anyone else, it was a shed, but to me, it felt alive. It had history in its bones. I wanted to restore it, document its architecture for my university grant, and maybe learn what it meant to bring something forgotten back to life. For the first few months, it was perfect. The mornings smelled like sawdust and coffee, and the afternoons were quiet except for the sound of the wind through the pines. The neighbors mostly kept to themselves, polite smiles, quick waves, never conversation. I later learned that most of them were part of a homeowners association that ruled the area like some small-town monarchy. I wasn't a member, and honestly, that was part of the reason I bought the place. No HOA meetings, no rules about what shade of beige your fence could be. Just me, my tools, and that old cabin. Then one June morning, I found an envelope tucked into my gate. Thick paper embossed logo, all official looking. I thought it was junk mail until I saw my name written so neatly it made me uneasy. The letter said my unauthorized guest structure violated community development codes and had to be removed within 30 days. I actually laughed when I first read it because that cabin had been built before the HOA even existed. But the more I read, the more I realized they weren't asking, they were telling. Like the past didn't matter, like they could rewrite time just because they had a printer and a board vote. I tried calling them, but there wasn't even a number listed. When I finally dug one up online, I got this woman who sounded like she was reading off a cue card. "If you received official notice, ma'am, that means it's already been reviewed by our compliance committee." I asked her how a committee could review a property they'd never seen, and she said all evaluations are visual drone records, satellite images. When I said I'd never received any warning letters, she told me it must have been a postal issue. And then, almost in a whisper, she gave me an address, Ridgeview Drive behind the plaza, like she wasn't supposed to say it out loud. So I went. The HOA office was this sterile glass front building squeezed between a dentist and a dry cleaner. Inside smelled like disinfectant and fear. A guy at the front desk slid a clipboard at me without looking up. "Sign in for compliance review." I told him I wasn't here for a review, I was here for answers. He looked annoyed, disappeared through a frosted door, and came back with the man himself, Calvin Reddington, HOA president. He had the kind of smile that could slice through your patience. "Miss Hale," he said, shaking my hand, "there seems to be some confusion. Your parcel is part of our new jurisdiction. Boundaries evolve, you see. Boundaries don't evolve." I told him, "Not without a court order." He smiled wider. "We can when it's about public safety. Your cabin obstructs an emergency corridor." I actually laughed out loud. "There's no corridor. There's a maple grove and a slope that's been there for 50 years. His eyes cooled. "You can contest the notice in writing, or comply. The second option is faster." That night I couldn't sleep. Something about the way he said it so certain, like my home was already his. The next morning I found orange survey flags along the edge of my property, each marked with the same code from the letter R47B. I took pictures, sent them to the county office, and got a one-line reply. "Boundary adjustments under HOA review are private matters. Translation, we won't get involved." Then the drones started. At first I thought it was kids, but then I saw the same small red light hovering behind the trees every night around midnight. And one morning I woke up to find tire tracks near the cabin, fresh ones. 2 men in orange vests showed up that afternoon claiming to be doing a routine inspection. I told them to get off my land. They said, "Just verifying line access," whatever that meant. That's when I started digging, literally and figuratively. I found a conduit line running under the soil right beneath the cabin, freshly installed. I traced it and realized it ran straight toward the HOA office down the hill. When I looked deeper into old land records, I found something even stranger. A dotted line labeled Proposed Community Access Link running across my property, something that had never existed on the original deed. And the name signed on the survey, Dr. Alan Reiner. Except Alan Reiner had been dead for 30 years. I went to the county archives, found his old research files. He'd worked for the institute that originally owned my land. Turns out the entire area sits above a protected underground aquifer. By law, no one was ever supposed to build directly over it. And guess where the HOA's shiny glass office was sitting? Right on top of it. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about my cabin. They were trying to take my parcel to cover up their illegal foundation. So I gathered every piece of evidence I could, maps, letters, permits, and filed a formal complaint to the county attorney. A few days later, a woman named Ortiz called me back. Calm voice, measured words. If what you're alleging is true, she said, this isn't just a zoning issue. It's a state violation. She told me to keep quiet, not to confront them again. But that same week, someone let the air out of my tires. A letter appeared on my gate saying emergency survey this weekend. And sure enough, 4 men with tripods showed up ignoring me like I was invisible. When I asked for ID, they showed cards that said Vail Compliance Division. No county seal, no legitimacy, just masks of authority. I knew then they weren't going to stop. So I went to the local paper. The editor, a woman named Lena, read through my folder in silence. When she saw the aquifer map, she looked up and said, "If this checks out, they're in deep trouble." She promised to verify it through the environmental board. For a moment, I felt hope. But hope makes you a target. 2 days later, I got served with a court injunction accused of obstructing public works. My property rights were frozen. My cabin labeled a secured zone. The judge assigned to the case, a former HOA board member. It was like fighting a hydra cut off one head. 2 more grew back wearing suits. Still, Ortiz didn't back down. She filed a counter motion with all my evidence attached. When the hearing day came, I walked into that courthouse feeling hollow. Calvin Reddington sat across the aisle with 2 lawyers who looked like they were born smirking. He leaned back in his chair, confident, waiting to watch me crumble. His attorney started first painting me as some hysterical homeowner obsessed with conspiracy theories. Then Ortiz stood up calm as stone and began laying out the documents one by one. Deed history, preservation permits, aquifer records. Then she held up a map and said, "The plaintiff's headquarters is located directly atop protected state property, an aquifer registered under Environmental Code 51A. Any structure built over it is subject to seizure." The courtroom went dead silent. The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying the HOA's main office is on government land?" Ortiz nodded. And these signatures on their zoning maps were forged using the name of a deceased researcher. Calvin's face drained of color. His lawyer sputtered about procedural errors, but Ortiz didn't flinch. "This isn't an error," she said. "It's fraud." When the judge finally spoke, his voice had weight. Effective immediately, the Brookridge Homeowners Association is under injunction, pending investigation by the State Property Commission. The defendant's structure stands on lawful ground and is hereby recognized as historically exempt. I swear when that gavel hit the wood, it felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Calvin didn't look so tall anymore. His eyes followed me as I walked out, but there was nothing left to say. Within weeks, the investigation confirmed everything. The HOA's office was condemned, sealed with yellow tape. The board disbanded. Neighbors who'd once avoided me started dropping by with shy apologies, bringing jars of honey or homemade bread like peace offerings. I didn't hold grudges. I just wanted the quiet back. One afternoon while cleaning the yard, I found an old metal sign half buried in the dirt. The words were faded but still legible. Briar Hollow Botanical Reserve. I brushed the rust off and mounted it on the cabin wall. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that some things survive simply because they refuse to disappear. Now the county's turning the land into a conservation site, and they asked me to help oversee it. Funny how the same soil they called illegal is now protected by law. Some nights I sit on that porch, the air cool, the woods finally still, and I think about how close they came to erasing a piece of history just to protect their power. So what do you think? Should people like Calvin face prison for what they did, or is losing everything punishment enough? Let me know in the comments below, because honestly, I still can't decide if justice was served or if it just stopped knocking long enough for me to breathe again.